Greetings, dear listeners, and welcome to Sci-Frights, the film discussion podcast from the interzone where horror meets science fiction. I am, as always, Liam Dunn, and with me is Lindsay Hallam.
Hello, so today we are concluding our series exploring the legacies of Frankenstein. So today we're taking a bit of a different tack, looking at how society itself has become a monster. So Liam, what films are we covering?
We have Richard Fleischer's 70s dystopian thriller Soylent Green and Brian Yuzna's satirical slapstick goofest Society.
Yes, and just a reminder to our listeners, we are going to spoil the hell out of these films. So please do watch these films first and then come back when you're done.
Sit back, relax, and enjoy the final episode of this inaugural season of Sci-Frights, I Blame Society.
So you came up with this idea for this episode, and at first I had a bit of difficulty kind of wrapping my head around what you were going for. So please explain to us, what are we doing today?
Oh no. I just thought, what could we do for a final episode to cap everything off? And we've been looking at Frankenstein and the legacy of the character and the story, and I thought, well, we've looked at all these different aspects: mad scientists, the creature themselves, diabolical surgeries, even mind control. And I thought, well, we should do a kind of macro version, look at it from a wider context. And I thought, well, what about society as monster? Because, is it in To Kill a Mockingbird where they say a person is smart but people are stupid? And it's like when we all get together and we kind of create this hive mind, we can be capable of some horrible things. But then also, and like what these two films explore is where society is sort of at the whim of the elite, of the aristocratic classes and the governments of the world, and how these institutions and these groups of people in power get corrupted or use that power for nefarious purposes.
Yeah, because it's something that throughout this season we're looking at the legacy of Frankenstein, but in some ways it's a deconstruction of the elements of Frankenstein. So we've gone in some quite different directions than maybe it would first be apparent when this idea of looking at the legacy of Frankenstein and how the elements of that narrative and character types and so on are used throughout horror and science fiction. And I think one of the things that's kept coming up in the episodes already that we've done so far is that it is often society itself, the institutions and systems of power that control us all, that are the ones that are capable of the most monstrous acts. And if you go back more to, I think if you go back to 1931 Frankenstein, you have this whole idea of with the Frankenstein story, the idea of the angry mob with pitchforks, and that's made up of villagers or common folk. But really, I think, like we seem to keep coming up against again and again, it is those institutions of power, and it's often the blame is put on the actual kind of people as they're the angry mob, and like you say, to collectively they're stupid. But actually it's often they're also victims as well as all of these kind of institutions and systems of power that are kind of controlling us all. And you could even say that in modern society, that a monster has been created, and it's kind of capitalism. I mean, it's getting very, very political, but it is something that almost every episode that we've looked at, certainly our last episode on mind control, that was the big kind of takeaway that seemed to be at the center of that like with mind control, it started off with the Svengali figure, just this one person who was using nefarious means to control someone, and that over time it is governments and other institutions, corporations as well, that are using those nefarious means to kind of control everyone. And I think definitely the films today certainly typify that.
When societies get fearful, it seems that's when things really start to crumble and things start to go wrong. And I think, what we're saying about the institutions and the elite and people in power who prey on those fears in order to sort of manipulate society, I suppose. So that's a way that generally decent people can be turned against each other.
And then it's definitely the whole thing of, like, we talked about in our third episode, the idea of the other. And it's the whole thing of, like, the other is the scapegoat. It's the whole thing of it is the systems of power, or pointing towards that group of people. And we see it now. It's like, point at that group, and usually the most vulnerable, powerless groups of people are touted as the reasons why things are terrible. And it's the whole thing of distracting people and pointing them away from who they should really be all uniting against, which is this elite, which I think is also, very much in the films we have today.
Or to look away from the actual problems that are going on because nobody wants to fix them because they're scared to, or they just, it's going to cost too much money or what have you.
And also it keeps those people in power, so they don't want it. They don't want anything to change. Yeah. They're doing fine.
This podcast became Pod Save the UK so quickly, I hardly even noticed.
I know. Maybe I might put off a lot of people.
We should probably start talking about some films just to...
I know, right? Yeah. Wrong meeting.
Yeah.
So let's start with our first film, Soylent Green.
What is the secret of Soylent Green? New York City, in the year 2022. Nothing runs anymore. Nothing works. But the people are the same. And the people will do anything to get what they need.
This is the police.
What they need most is Soylent Green.
The supply of Soylent Green has been exhausted. Return to your home.
What is the secret of Soylent Green? Detective Sergeant Thorne. He has a 2-year backlog of unsolved murders. Now he's on a case that must be solved. Saul Roth, Thorne's private library.
Hey, Saul.
A living book in a world without books.
Have some pencils, courtesy of your next assignment. William R. Simonson.
Simonson. He was the first to learn the secret of Soylent Green.
They told me to say that they were sorry, but that you had become unreliable.
Saul Roth was the next to know.
How do we come to this?
And he chose to die rather than reveal the secret of Soylent Green. What is the secret of Soylent Green?
Why did you set up Simonson?
I didn't.
Cheryl.
Let's see your hands.
Officially, she's furniture. She comes with the apartment. She belongs to the tenant.
How many times you been in trouble with the police, Cheryl?
Never.
Can't hear you.
Never.
Captain Hatcher. First, he wanted this case solved.
Simonson, what do you say?
It was an assassination.
Now, he just wants it
Who
closed.
bought you? High and hot, and they want this case closed permanently. Their way. Now, you sign this.
You sign it!
Thorne refuses to close the Simonson case.
Just do what you have to do. Where did you go with Simonson?
He took me to church.
Church.
Bless me, Father, for I have sinned. It has been 6 months since my last confession.
Charlton Heston, Edward G. Robinson, Chuck Connors, Lee Taylor Young, Brock Peters, Paula Kelly, and Joseph Cotton fight for survival and try to solve the most bizarre riddle ever to face mankind. The search for the secret of Soylent Green. You will find out why Soylent Green means life. You will find out why Soylent Green means death.
We've got to stop him! Somehow!
What is the secret of Soylent Green?
Please!
So, Liam, tell us about this film.
Soylent Green, as we said at the top, is 70s dystopian science fiction, made in 1973 and set in the not-too-distant future of 2022. Wait, checks notes. Oh, wait, that's 3 years ago. Soylent Green posits it's the future of 2022, and it posits a world of overpopulation, food scarcity, climate crises, depleted resources, housing shortages, the elites, as we were saying, controlling society and keeping all of the goods and the produce for themselves. So that sounds very, very familiar to this day and age.
Yeah, isn't this meant to be science fiction?
I know, right? It's a documentary. And it follows Charlton Heston as Thorne, who is he's a cop who is just going about his day within New York City, which is now filled with 40 million people. And by going about his day, he is living with his co-worker, Sol, played by Edward G. Robinson, who is in his final film, who is a lot older than Thorne, and they just scrabble around New York City, stepping over people who are just sleeping in the corridors and on the streets and on the stairways, just trying to scratch out an existence. And Thorne gets a call to go and investigate what he is told is a robbery gone wrong, which has resulted in the murder of an aristocrat named Simonson, played by Joseph Cotton. And when he gets there, he realizes that there are all the clues point to not a robbery at all, that nothing has been stolen, but that this man has just been murdered. And him and Sol then begin to investigate what's happening, while the police try to shut down the investigation because the higher-ups don't want anybody looking into what has happened. And as they investigate, they discover that the company Soylent, which Simonson was a part of, in collaboration with the government, have been creating this foodstuff called Soylent Green, which everybody's told is made from soybeans, lentils, and plankton from the ocean. There's Soylent Red, Soylent Yellow, Soylent Green, and it's basically a cheap foodstuff that is then handed out to the populace because there is just not enough food to go around. Nobody knows what steak is. Nobody has fresh fruit. They just eat this Soylent stuff. And through their investigation, and quite famously for this film, they discover that Soylent Green is not made by plankton because the ecosystem of the ocean has deteriorated so much that it is unsustainable, but that Soylent Green is now being made from the corpses of dead people. So they're basically recycling the human population into itself.
So it was made in 1973, so set in 2022. So it's positing what can happen 50 years in the future. And from the opening credits, it's a really great opening credit sequence where it has all these old photos of the past. It looks like people, pioneers from the Old West. And slowly you're seeing these photos of people, but also of land becoming cities. Everything becomes modernized. You see more cars, and as it goes along, the music gets faster, and as it goes along, it also has split screens, and you see all the advancements in tech and factories and lots of smoke, but also there's shots of armies, decay and rubbish. You see people in masks, and then it focuses more into New York cityscape. It encapsulates very, very quickly that the future is a product of the past. And so it's in some ways it's kind of saying that this is a almost probable future, or this almost seems inevitable, that we're just going out of control towards this future where it's just too much. All this technological and industrial advancement has just created this decaying society where there's just so much stuff and so much people and everything's almost just dying. So it is a really, really, I think, effective opening. that really kind of shows you that is very much the kind of quintessential dystopian city.
Yeah, and I think it. I think we mentioned it when we were watching it, that it has this kind of green smoggy pallor to everything out when they're outside their houses and buildings and stuff. And I remember when I first watched it, and it was a pretty raw copy, that I thought it was just a fault of the tape that I was, but it was actually, it's a stylistic choice to have this just sickly green sort of tint on everything. The opening montage, I think, is really interesting, that it kind of shows the history of modernization, frontier through to the industrial age, through to what is the present day of the film. And it feels to me like it's this warning. The whole film even is this warning about we're so enamored with our own technological advancement that we're not stopping to think that of what we're actually doing to the planet and to ourselves through this march forward of progress, and that the inevitability of Soylent Green feels to me like that there's such short-sightedness over what problems we're going to be facing going forward, that we're just making stuff up as we go along to try and just manage the situation. And we're at a point in this society where, I think Edward G. Robinson's character Sol says things like, "When in my day, food was food," and he has all the memories of what trees look like and what's and about fruit and things like that. And now he's sort of the mouthpiece of what the world used to be like and how horrible it's gotten.
So he still remembers what it used to be like. And I think at one point he mentioned something about the greenhouse effect.
Yeah.
So you have this awful yellow, browny, greeny smog over everything. So obviously it's just pollution is out of control. There's heat waves all the time. Like everything is all just sweaty and clammy throughout in this film. And also you've got just overpopulation. So it states at the very beginning that it's New York City, it's 2022, and the population is 40 million people. And you have just people everywhere. And it's the people, but also the rubbish that is being created, but also the fact that the people become rubbish, that people become just this waste to be disposed of. And so you just see that, I just always think of that near the beginning of the film, of Thorne coming out of his house that he shares with Sol, and just people all on the staircases trying to sleep. And one of the things that I noticed in terms of the layout of the city, so often you think of futuristic cities, it's all kind of vertical. It's always very like high rise. But what I noticed in Soylent Green is that it's almost like there's a lot of tracking shots. And I noticed that the tracking shots are often, it must be like long lenses. And often Thorne or the characters are in the midground, and you've got in the foreground, often it's just lots of people or stalls, or when they're in the factory, the bits of factory interiors, or chain links and bars and things. And so it's always moving kind of horizontally, because things aren't, I guess, growing. It's kind of just stagnating, and everything's just, it's just kind of overcrowded. So it's just an interesting kind of stylistic technique that I noticed throughout the film. Along with the environmental problems, they talk about inflation. And I think at one point near the beginning, you see Simonson, played by Joseph Cotton, who really is not in the film at all for very long. I was shocked that he gets killed very, very quickly. But I think is it near the beginning where he goes to a place and buys some food, and I think he just comes back with a few pieces. And he says that just these few pieces of food cost $250. I think later on they talk about a box of strawberries costing $150. Yeah. I mean, is it that far off from where we're at?
They're talking about eggs in the United States and things like that, yeah.
I mean, you think about like the 1970s, I guess that was the decade where people started to realize all the environmental problems, like the idea of the greenhouse effect. And you had instances like 3 Mile Island. You started to have instances of, was it like acid rain and things like that people were starting to realize the environmental destruction that has been wreaked upon the planet through our industrialization and modernization and stuff.
Well, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in the United States, was only set up in 1970 by Richard Nixon, no less. So it was obviously there was a recognition that something needed to be done, because I'm guessing up until that point, and I mean they still do now. It's not like corporations were just dumping stuff into rivers and oceans and without a care in the world, thinking like, well, who cares? And then it's like, well, no, there's a realization that we're actually doing harm, and so we've got to bring in regulation to say, well, you can't do this and you can't do that, because otherwise, we won't have clean waterways and we won't have clean skies and things. I mean, there's still a lot of that stuff going on, but at least there's some regulation, I suppose, now.
Because if you think like 50s and 60s it was all about, I guess, the Cold War and the nuclear threat. And I think as you get into the 70s, people, I guess, weren't so worried that the bomb was going to drop and, nuclear annihilation. It was realizing now that the cost of all this mass production is this, the pollution and all the problems, and it's making us all sick. You're starting to see the fact that we're creating, like, certainly plastics and things. Like, that's one of the things about Soylent Green itself. They're like these plastic squares. It's very inorganic. It's almost like, how do they eat? Yeah. How do you actually eat this kind of these weird plastic things? There's the whole thing of like, there was all this really starting to get all this plastic being produced, and the fact that we're creating all this waste and it's not breaking down, and we're realizing, oh no, there's no getting rid of this. We're creating all this stuff and it's just there. It's never gonna break down because it's not natural. So it is really quite a awful kind of hopeless existence that you see in this film quite quickly.
And you have these the knock-on effects of the overpopulation and the breakdown of society in other ways as well. I think the film does a really good job of they don't stop every 5 minutes to go, well, this is this and this is why this is happening. They just kind of have. So like Sol, they're like, oh, we need the lights to come back on. So Sol gets on an exercise bike and starts riding the bike to charge the batteries. And you just see these bank of car batteries that are all covered in limescale, and because they're really old and leaking. And that's their power source. Like, there's no energy infrastructure. They just have to ride an exercise bike. And the things about how he's a cop, but it's kind of like the way the police seem to work is that they're more like bounty hunters. Like, they get his chief of detectives seems to get paid, and then he gives a bit of that money to the police under him, depending on the case they're working on or something like that. There's like little references to that. So they almost work by commission. It's not like a steady salary. And then so when he goes to Simonson's place to investigate the crime scene, he's just taking all the stuff.
It's so funny. It's a very funny
He's
thing.
just like, yum, apple, and here's some beef, and here's this. And he just takes it and he's like, that's mine now. The perks of the job. And then when he's there, he meets, is it Shelley, who's like the woman who you think is Simonson's much younger girlfriend or wife, but it turns out that she comes with the apartment, and she's talking about how there's going to be a new tenant coming in and I don't know if he's going to want me. So it's the role of women in this society. It's like if you want any level of comfort, you basically work as a sex worker. Heston refers to her as furniture at one point.
He keeps calling her furniture.
I know, our hero, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah. But, but that's the world that they live in, and that's the world he's grown up in. So, why would he act any differently, really? It's
that she's a commodity, that she literally does come with the house. Yeah. She is like a piece of the furniture. Yeah. And so she is just this commodity. And so you definitely see the difference in where Simonson lives compared to Thorne or compared to everyone else. So it's very clear that there's only just a small section of the population that are living in any form of comfort or even actually have actual food.
Well, like when he brings the beef home, like Sol cries.
I know, it's heartbreaking. Avery Robinson is so good in this film.
And also there's a bit where Heston's looking through a bag and he pulls out rice, and someone goes, "Oh, that's rice," and he's like, "Oh yeah, I've seen that before." So people are assuming that you don't know what fresh food looks like.
Yeah, but I mean, going back to that when Thorne goes to Simonson's house. I mean, the other thing that I really love is that he goes into the bedroom and then he just takes the pillowcase off and just starts shoving
stuff in it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's and one of the things that he also does at the crime scene is he's like, oh my God, soap, and he washes his hands. So again, it's that whole thing of I think of all the the heat wave, and it is just everything is dirty, and just being able to wash your hands and soap is and just being able to be clean. I mean, that's another thing, is like how undignified must it feel that you're feeling dirty all the time. And soap soap and actual food become these prized rare items.
I mean, there is that montage as well when Thorne and Sol are eating the food that he's brought back, and it's just this it is a moment where the film kind of stops for them to just enjoy this very, very rare moment. And then he eats the apple, and he eats he even eats the core.
And the stem.
And it's because it's just just eat it all, because you're never when is the next time you're going to have this?
And it's almost like, it almost seemed to me that he didn't even know how to eat an apple.
Yeah.
That he had probably never had an apple before. So he was like, oh, you just eat all of it, right?
And his mind's blown when there's ice in a drink. He's like, oh, wow, ice. You never see that anymore. Because that's what these people like Simonson and they mentioned the governor and the board of Soylent. They live in these lush luxury apartments that come with women built in, and they have beef and they have apples and they have ice in their drinks and bourbon. They get all of this stuff. It's so rare now and costs so much money. And then there's I can't remember his name, but Chuck Connors plays the henchman.
Tab Fielding.
Tab. and Thorne goes to see, or Charles Heston's character Thorne goes to see him in his apartment. And he realizes, he sees the spoon which has strawberry on it, residue, and that's when we say $150 box of strawberries. And he's like, so I see that so he realizes that Tab's being bribed basically with luxury goods, not with money, but with strawberries. And so there's, so this hoarding of the resources, and then what they do is they then just mass produce this Soylent stuff, which look like poker chips. And then Tuesday is Soylent Day, and that people go and they're all lining up around the block for their portion of Soylent for the week. And the rest of the time they just have to scrabble and scratch around for whatever else they can find and step over each other. And so there's a real divide between the haves and the have-nots.
But yet what's also interesting is that when Simonson is found, and I remember it was when Thorne is looking through his stuff and he says something like his occupation is rich.
Yeah.
But then later you find out he worked in it seems like he worked in law and politics and business and was on the board of Soylent. But yet, even with Simonson, you have his body being taken away and he becomes waste disposal.
Yeah.
So ultimately, even this rich guy ends up just becoming another kind of some waste that needs to be disposed of. Possibly he also becomes Soylent Green. I wonder if they even have a distinction whether just everyone who dies becomes, which would be interesting. And it's one of the things where Shirl when he's being taken away, she talks about, I remember we used to have. I remember with my grandmother, there used to be some kind of ceremony, and she's referring to funerals, and so the whole thing is that funerals don't happen anymore. So even this richest guy at the top of the society all ends up in the same place as everyone else. What's also interesting about this film is that you have Thor, who's a detective, so you have this detective narrative. It kind of reminded me of Blade Runner in a sense. Actually, at the beginning of the film, there is this shady guy who you see get given this weapon, which he ends up killing Simonson with. And so at first it's all supposed to seem like it's a robbery. But then when the guy comes in, Simonson it seems like he's been waiting for this. Like he somehow
knows it's coming.
Yeah. And the whole thing is that we find out that he has found out what Soylent Green is, and he, I guess, can't live with the knowledge that it's actually people, and that people are basically being forced to be cannibals. As Thorne goes along, there's that point where he goes to a church because it turned out that Simonson had confessed before he died. And I think before he goes into the church, he just finds a baby, and it's kind of tethered to this woman who, I think, if I remember correctly, she looks like she's dead. And so he picks up the baby, goes to the church, but then talks to the priest about Simonson. And the priest, I just remember the priest in that scene, he just, because he also knows that he's just, I think he even says at one point, it's destroying me, the truth. And you can just see that for people, I guess the people that Simonson and this priest, this truth is like, they can't handle it. And it's just, I just found it really interesting that at the end of that scene, because the priest is almost completely not catatonic, but you could just tell he's just like,
he's just wandering around like aimlessly, not knowing what to do with himself.
And the church is just overflowing with people, as everything is, everywhere is. And I just remember there's the shot where at the end of the scene where he just kind of sits down near like an altar or something, and you can just tell he's just completely despondent. The detective narrative is an interesting aspect of the film. It is all about like, what is Soylent Green? But everyone knows what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of when you come to watch it, like I this is only the second time I've seen it. I saw it years and years ago, and I already knew that it's the whole, like, the Soylent Greeners people has become a well-known thing.
I think it's like 77th in the most list of most famous lines uttered in films, because he says it. Heston says it at the end as he's kind of being dragged away because he discovers the truth. But I think, the detective narrative is a way into the world, and it's the kind of procedural aspect is very effective. It's probably, it's done a lot because it's a very effective way to get viewers, readers into a world like this. But it's interesting to think that, I can't remember, it's not really clear as to why they kill Simonson, other than I assume they don't want the story getting out as to what happened. But I just wonder if, like, because society's in such bad shape in this film that if it did come out, would it even matter? Everything is so, like, run down and everybody's so desperate that I don't know if it would really matter much. I mean, there's the scene where they're all waiting, and then someone comes out and they have to say, or the cops have to say they've run out of Soylent and that there's none left for anybody, and they just riot. And the only way they can stop the rioting is they just bring in these garbage trucks with the big
called them scoops.
Scoops with the big front hoe thing on the front, and they literally just scoop people up and dump them into the back of these garbage trucks, and the ones that die presumably go and get reprocessed. And the whole idea, and I think I've read somewhere where people say, oh, the film is looks very low budget, and because like these are just garbage trucks with scoops on the front, and the cops the riot cops wear like football helmets for protective gear. But I see this as just like society is so degraded that this is all that's left. Like there's no more riot gear for the police. They've just got to use what they can find, and they find these gridiron helmets to wear, and they just repaint them or what have you. And there's a bit where they go to like a tree sanctuary, and it's this like greenhouse thing, and you go inside and there's like 3 tiny trees in there. And these are the only trees that are left, and these piddly, pathetic little things. And it's like you could be cynical and say, oh, looks very low budget. But I think that's if it is, it just adds to the verisimilitude of the film, is that this world is just so degraded, so downgraded, so pitiful, that there's just like, this is what we're protecting. And this is the other thing about sort of, I guess, post-apocalyptic films, dystopian films that I find interesting, is the human desire to just hold on to whatever's left, and we would start doing the decisions we make just to hold on to these, to some semblance of normality. And you watch these films and you wonder, why don't you just give up sometimes, because it's just so bad. But it's like, but you just want to, it's that desire to just hold on to whatever's left and just survive.
I mean, that's the thing. Is like everyone is there. Everyone is just surviving. The fact that it looks low budget, I agree with you. I think it totally adds to the film because it is the thing where there's just no resources. Any resources are just held on to by a very, very small portion of the population, and so even the police don't have any resources. You always have. I think there was a scene. I think it's people. I don't know if it's in the police station, but yeah, people waiting for to be helped when they're at these, I guess, the market, and they're all there. Because I remember it even says there was one stall that said Soylent crumbs, and that whole riot scene and the scoops, I think it is the whole thing of like, again, people are just treated like garbage. Yeah. It's waste disposal.
Because there's so many of them. There's so many people. And that all you can do is, just scoop them up and drag them away.
And it is an amazing scene because also in that scene you have, because Thorne has been told to like just drop it. It was just a robbery that went wrong. Like, stop looking into all of this. And it obviously becomes clear that there's a governor, Santini, who in the tree sanctuary scene, he is talking to the guy that killed Simonson. And then that scene with the riot, that assassin or killer is there, and he's trying to kill Thorne. But he just shoots into the crowd, and of course there's so many people, so people are getting shot. People are rioting, people are just being run over. But then, of course, with the scoops coming in, and then you have the killer just getting squished. But it's this whole thing of like, there's just so many people, there's so much like overpopulation that once something happens, it's just there is no way for you to get out of harm's way. It's just. Everything's just kind of descending into chaos because it's just lots of people with not enough resources, not enough food. So everyone is just desperate. And like you say, it is like, why would you hold on? But then there is the fact, and it's one of the most incredible scenes in the film, where there is actually a place that you can go to where you're like, I've had enough of this.
Euthanasia centre. Going back to the whole thing with Simonson, when he finds out the truth, he knows they're going to send someone to kill him, and he says something like, I have to die because it's necessary to God. Like, he understands. He doesn't even want to live anymore. The priest, I think, kills himself as well because he can't live with the truth. So when Saul is investigating, looking into the research that they found at Simonson's apartment, and he discovers the truth, he's like, well, I've lived too long. I think he says that, I've lived too long, and I'm going home. And he's like, I can't do this anymore. I can't live with this. I can't live the way I've been living and know this truth. So he goes to this euthanasia centre where they...
So can I just ask a question, though? I don't get... So there's... When Thorne goes to Simonson's house, he brings home these big books, ledgers or whatever, and then Saul's looking through all these books to try and find information. And then at one point he goes to this place with all these other old people. It looks like a library or something. I think it's called, there's a sign that says something like Supreme Exchange or whatever. And all the old people there, they seem to know the truth. And I don't actually get, how does Saul figure it out?
I think
it just said that whole bit seemed unclear. Like, he's obviously, he finds out what it is. And then he's like, I can't live with this.
Well, my interpretation is that they call him Thorne's book. And I think, I don't. It's not really explained, or unless I missed something. But it seems to me, because with all those other people, and he calls the woman Your Honor. So I'm thinking that maybe she's a judge or was a judge. That all the old people are what are called books, because they know the past. They have memory of it, and they safeguard the information that's left. And so I think he brings the books to them. He finds these oceanographic studies by the Soylent Company, which it turns out that the plankton, because it's just run out. because you think plankton, there's so much plankton in the ocean that would never run out. But then the more you remove plankton, the more the ecosystem of the oceans would suffer, because they're delicate. It's a delicate balance, I would think. So I think he brings that to them, and they have basically a powwow where they go through what information they have and they discuss it, and they go, well, this is the conclusion. This is the only logical conclusion that we can come to, is that they're no longer using the plankton, that they're using people to re-up their supplies of Soylent, and just feeding it back to the living. And so I think that's what that is, because they kind of cut away from it and then they cut back, and he's like, oh my God, I can't believe this. So I think that's kind of what's happened. But and that's when he realizes that he doesn't want to live anymore. And he goes to, and I think, is the euthanasia center run by Soylent? Because I'm assuming he's going to end up processed as well.
Well, yes, yeah, because afterwards that's when Thorne, after that, goes in the back of the truck and then goes to the factory. But and
so they bring Soul in, and they ask him what his favorite color is, what his favorite music is, and and they basically lie him down on a bed in this big room, and presumably they inject him with something, and the screens in the room all light up, and it's like a surround screen, and this music plays. There's orange lighting, because that's, he said his favorite color, and he just watches all this footage of what the world used to look like: forests with trees, flowers, green fields, blue skies, mountain ranges. And Thorne realizes where he is and what he's done, so he runs to the place, and he's able to he forces the attendant to open the window so he can look in, and he sees the footage, and he can't believe what he's seeing. And I think and he talks to Soul, and Soul says, do you see it? Do you see it? Or something. He's like, yes, I can't, it's like he's never seen this stuff before. And he is able to put headphones on to listen to Soul, and that's when Soul tells him the secret about Soylent Green. And you don't, because they withhold this information right up until the end, so Charlton Heston can go, Soylent Green is people, at the end. So you only see Heston's face as he's hearing what Robinson's telling him, and so in his final moments, he's able to tell him the truth. And it's really poignant. It's a really beautiful scene. And it's really poignant because Edward G. Robinson died a week after filming Wrapped.
Oh my God,
or
really?
something like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So he was definitely so it feels really, it's very sad and very touching scene.
And even Charlton Heston in that scene as well, he's so moved.
Yeah.
And I think Soul's saying to him, can you see it? And then I think at one point Thorne says, how could I ever imagine? And he's looking at the screen, and both, Edward G. Robinson and Charlton Heston are just, it is a really, really moving scene. And yeah, it's the whole thing of, this is how beautiful the world can be, but yeah, this is what it is now, the whole thing. And now we're reduced to we're eating each other. And things could be so beautiful, and then there's this, and that is the whole thing, I guess. Also, how could you live on, knowing what the world could be or what it used to be, and now it is just at this absolute base point where it is mass production is we really are eating ourselves, and that it's been reduced to this absolute base level, because cannibalism is the biggest taboo.
Yeah.
And the fact that this taboo, which, that is seen as almost the most heinous act that someone could do, is now being mass produced, and people are basically forced to consume each other. And it makes me think about with cannibalism in films, but also I keep thinking a lot about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which was made a year after this film. And in that you have, it's almost like the proletariat, the workers have been reduced. And that's also because of development and modernization, that they've just become these cannibalistic creatures almost, that they have been reduced to this base level of just killing and eating, and the whole idea of that they worked at the slaughterhouse and then they just move on to slaughtering human beings because they lose their jobs at the slaughterhouse. And it also, I mean, I've managed to not go to the Marquis de Sade, even though you brought him up last episode. It wasn't me. But I do think also about Pier Paolo Pasolini's adaptation of the 120 Days of Sodom, Salo, which was made in 1975. And in that it is this adaptation of Sade's unfinished novel that just degenerates into these atrocities. And in that you have these pillars of society who create almost their own society in this isolated place. And in that it's all about the eating of shit. And Pasolini actually has said that all the shit eating in the film in many ways was his statement about processed foods and the fast food industry. And he even said the manufacturers force the consumer to eat excrement. All these industrial foods are worthless refuge. So it's this whole thing of like eating shit or eating people. It is this statement about like what the kind of inevitable endpoint of mass production is, that we are going to be eating our waste, eating ourselves. So I think it's really dark if you think about it. And the fact that the film ends with him, and he's in the church again, isn't he? And the way that it ends, it's obvious that it's just going to keep going. But before we get to that, I mean, I also want to talk about the sequence after the sequence where Soul dies. We then go to this kind of prolonged sequence in the factory. And I'm pretty sure there's like no dialogue, is there?
I don't think so.
Yeah. And it's just this, you just see him, Thorne's gone into the back of one of these garbage trucks that you can see that all the people that are euthanizing themselves are being, you kind of see kind of behind, what would you call it? The place.
Processing center.
The processing center. It all looks very nice, and like the two people that are attending Soul have these white robes and they look almost like angels, and everything looks very good and very clean. And then you kind of follow with Thorne and you see, well, actually it's all just people they're taken from, they have this, this nice death, but then they just become waste disposal. That needs to be disposed of. And you see him kind of in the garbage truck where these people are being taken, and you see him, and he goes through the whole process. So you see the bodies being put through into like chutes and things, but also as he's following along, he's being chased by people as well. So it's also a very kind of thrilling sequence as well. But I like the fact that it takes its time. And you're seeing very kind of methodically, it starts with the bodies being brought in, and then it's all these different kind of factory conveyor belt systems. And then at the end, you have the weird plastic squares that is Soylent Green. We're with Thorne as everything's falling into place and we're realizing what's going on.
Well, it makes you wonder that, there's so much effort put into the processing of turning people into food. You'd think they'd put the same amount of effort into, I don't know, saving the environment. It's like we're capable of doing all this stuff, of creating systems and ways of working and things like that, but we're just doing it in all the wrong ways. And I think seeing when he goes to the factory and you just see like how systematic the whole thing is, and they've got this whole supply chain worked out in order to just kind of keep the population ticking over, but nothing about trying to actually improve things. It's just about treading water until the inevitable collapse of everything, I suppose.
I guess it's just this cycle that there's no stopping it. It's like it's like the opening credits where it's becoming more and more intense and frantic.
Yeah.
And there's no stopping this. This is just this inevitable kind of almost dissent, I think. Yeah, so towards the end, the fact that you have Thorne, he's realised this is what's happening, that Soylent Green is people. He goes to a church and there's Tab, the bodyguard, and there's a big fight, and again the church is just full of homeless people, just lots of people kind of desperate. The cops come. There's a big fight, so it's a big climactic scene, and it's very chaotic because, again, like with the riot scene, the Tab is just kind of shooting, trying to get at Thorne, but people are just getting in the way. And you have the police arrive, and it almost seems like, oh yes, he's going to be able to almost, maybe he can save the day here, the police here. But then we've also seen that the police are pretty corrupt, like they're in the pockets of the Governor Santini. But the fact that it is it's a really abrupt ending, that he does say Soylent Green is people, and he's then being taken away, but then it ends with this freeze of his kind of fist. And the fact that it ends at that point, I mean, what did you make of, why did it choose to end at that point?
It's a very uncertain ending, isn't it? I mean, while he finds out the truth and he's trying to let everybody know what's happening, we're not sure what's going to what's going to happen after the credits roll. I think it's an either or situation. Most likely, he'll just get taken away, killed, turned into Soylent Green, and like nobody will know. Or like I said, like would it even matter? Like at the end of the day, like you still got to eat.
Yeah.
We still got to hold on to these last scraps of society, of humanity. But he does say, doesn't he say something like the oceans are dying, the plankton's dying, Soylent Green is people. Next, they'll be breeding us like cattle. So maybe that'll happen. Is that they'll just once the truth comes out, the pretense will just drop, and they will just be like, yeah, let's just put, we've got 40 million people in New York, half of them are unemployed. Well, let's put half of them into breeding pens and just process them like cattle.
Yep. Yeah, and it's definitely it is that whole thing of it is just the kind of a magnification of a lot of, well, you think about factory farming, the conditions for the animals in a lot of these places is just awful, that they are kind of penned in and they are just bred and then killed and almost like fed to it. That's why we get all these strange bird flus and all these new diseases because of the conditions in this situation, and that what is being fed to these animals as well, just disgusting stuff. So yes, he's figured it out. He's found out what Soylent Green is, which is what he wanted to find out. And it's not going to change anything. I think you're right, where it's like, okay, even if people know,
well, they're going to stop eating it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly, because it's the only thing they can eat.
Yeah.
And you do have in the film the media, and you see the people on the television, the news and things. Again, looking at the situation today, would he, you probably would, even if it did come out, you would get people saying, well, no, this is just a crazy guy, or it's fake news or whatever. So it is, I think, very much a downbeat ending, which I think is also keeping with, this is a Hollywood film, it's a science fiction film, but also in the 70s you had the new Hollywood period with Coppola and Scorsese and so on. But a lot of the films being made in the 1970s have this real downbeat mood to them, and almost like despondency. That there's nothing we can do. And if you think, well, it's, to do with like post-Vietnam, people, being sent over there in this war, people seeing the violence of war on their television screens, but also this distrust of the government because you get Watergate and so on.
Yeah, the Pentagon Papers and things like that.
Yeah, so it is this time where, the 70s is a very, very dark decade, I think. And even Hollywood films, they couldn't just be escapism anymore. That was seen as, that was almost seen as old fashioned, that people could take that, let's just pretend everything's nice and just have, just things for entertainment, that even like, well, all the best science fiction and horror we keep talking about are dealing with these things. So, and you've got Charlton Heston, who makes a lot of these films at that time.
Society in real life is changing where they want socially conscious films. They want to go, don't want escapism, they want to come and watch films that reflect what's going on in the real world and have things that feel ripped from the headlines. There was a lot of dystopian sci-fi in the 70s, but a lot of it's because there were all this stuff was written in novels and short stories in the 50s and 60s by the science fiction authors who were already thinking about this sort of stuff before it was really in vogue. And just quickly, this film, Soylent Green, is actually based on a Harry Harrison book called Make Room, Make Room. I always find it fun. I love when you look at science fiction films and you got names like Blade Runner and Soylent Green, and then you see what books they're based on. It's like, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? And Make Room, or I don't know, I left my mind wallet at the Brain Factory, and then it's turned into a film called Thunderbolt or something.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually read the book, but from what I understand, it's actually more of an anthology. It's a bunch of different stories, all set around 1999, around New Year's as it turns to the year 2000. And then, but it's all about overpopulation, and it's about a New York City that's, it says, posits a future where the world population is 7 billion people. And it's like, that's what we have now. And so I think they took a lot of elements from the book, and developed Soylent Green out of those elements. It's not a direct adaptation. Apparently Harrison was contractually denied any control over the screenplay and was not told that the rights were being bought. When asked if he's pleased with the film, he said around 50% pleased with it. But anyway, and then you have the film was directed by Richard Fleischer, who is the son of Max Fleischer, who's famous for his Superman, Popeye, and Betty Boop animations from the 40s. But then Richard Fleischer had a very interesting career as a director. He did Dr. Dolittle and Tora, Tora, Tora. He did The Vikings, which is a personal favourite of ours, isn't it? With Kirk Douglas and Tony Curtis. And then did like 10 Wellington Place and Boston Strangler. So he had very eclectic, and he did Conan the Destroyer and Red Sonja.
I know.
A very eclectic group of bunch of films by this guy.
Yeah, because I think he started off in the 40s making a lot of like film noir. Then he worked with Disney on 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and then he makes things like the Viking. And then there's these weird films that in there, like Compulsion as well, about serial killers. But then, like you said, Dr. Dolittle and Fantastic Voyage.
Oh yeah, Fantastic Voyage.
Yeah, so he's going all over the place. He ends up making the very controversial film Mandingo.
And Barabbas.
Yes. So he is the kind of journeyman type of director, but always picks really, really interesting things, very, very varied things. And yeah, it is really interesting that he did something like Dr. Dolittle, which is often seen as the death knell, one of the films that was like the death knell of the classical Hollywood period, where all these big overblown like musicals and things that the younger generation were completely rejecting. And then he comes back with this, which is, I guess it's fitting. He's like, he obviously was able to go, okay, this isn't what people want now. We'll do this instead. But yeah, definitely the 70s dystopias. We just watched Rollerball last night. I'd not seen that before. And you think about there's Logan's Run, Silent Running, which also has a very clear environmentalist theme. And then in Australia, you've got Mad Max. And of course, our last episode, A Clockwork Orange. And it's interesting to think about how, obviously in A Clockwork Orange, Beethoven plays a very important role. And I was looking up some of the music that's used, especially the sequence with Soul when he dies, and also the end credits. And the end credit music, which I'm pretty sure the closing credits music was used in the scene with Soul. It's from Beethoven, Symphony No. 6, called Pastoral awakening of cheerful feelings on arrival in the countryside. So again, it's the irony of that music over the closing credits of this film. Yeah, so I was just really surprised seeing the film again. I think it really works well, and I think it unfortunately does feel very not too far-fetched watching it 3 years after
it's supposedly
it's
set.
Yeah.
Oh, I did actually have some notes here on Edward G. Robinson. And so it was 2 months after filming was completed, he passed away. He had bladder cancer. And it's in his book, The Actor's Life, Charlton Heston wrote, quote, "He knew while we were shooting, though we did not, that he was ill, terminally ill. He never missed an hour of work nor was late to a call. He never was less than the consummate professional he had been all his life. I'm still haunted, though, by the knowledge that the very last scene he played in the picture, which he knew was the last day's acting he would ever do, was his death scene. I know why I was so overwhelmingly moved playing it with him." And Robinson had previously worked with Heston in the 10 Commandments. And it says here makeup tests for Planet of the Apes. Yes, and the music used in his death scene is a mix of Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and Edvard Grieg.
All right, so we're moving out of the 70s dystopia right into the tail end of the 1980s with Society.
Beverly Hills is known as a society of wealth and privilege, but Billy Whitney doesn't seem to be getting his share. He thinks everyone is out to get him, even his friends.
You never were one of us.
He thinks that he doesn't belong.
And they don't even look like me. Why are you guys doing this to me, huh?
He believes he's seeing things. Bad things. Beyond reality. Is it just his imagination?
I'm not paranoid. All my fears are real.
Or has Billy uncovered something terrible? Something unspeakable?
Don't go home, Billy.
What, you've been living with these people all your life and you didn't know anything about this?
If you don't follow the rules, Billy, bad things happen.
You know you'll make such a great contribution to society.
Who are you?
And now Billy
It's showtime, Billy!
is fighting for more than just his sanity. He's fighting for his life. The time is coming for Billy to take his place. In society, it's all about fitting in.
So Society is about Bill Whitney, who's the son of an affluent family in Beverly Hills, but he feels like an outsider. He confesses to his therapist that things don't feel right. There's something going on that he doesn't know about. His fears are confirmed when his sister Jenny's ex-boyfriend David Blanchard tells him that something weird is going on and plays a tape from Jenny's coming out party that suggests that the coming out party was actually an orgy that involved her committing incestuous acts with her parents and other high society guests, and also that it must have been probably also involved someone being killed. However, when Bill plays the tape to his therapist, the recording has been changed. Bill tries to get another copy of the tape from Blanchard, but on the way to their meeting, Blanchard dies in a fatal car accident. Bill's girlfriend Shauna is upset that they haven't been invited to a party at Ted Ferguson's house, and after the accident, Bill is suddenly invited. At the party, Ted confesses that the original recording was real, and then Bill leaves with Clarissa, a girl who he had seen previously. They have sex, and at one point, Bill looks at her and she seems all twisted. And this is much like an earlier scene where he had seen Jenny in the shower, and she also seemed all kind of strange and contorted. Shauna is told about Bill and Clarissa, and they break up. And his opponent in the election for class president, Martin Petrie, comes to Bill and says he has evidence of the conspiracy. And when they meet, he then finds Petrie dead. But this all turns out to be a ruse, and when he arrives at the next school debate and tells everyone what is happening, Petrie shows up alive, making Bill a laughingstock. When Bill arrives home, he's forcibly sent to the hospital. His friend Milo finds him at the hospital, and they go back to Bill's home where a party is happening. Blanchard appears, he's still alive, and he becomes a victim of the shunt, a grotesque orgy where all of the elite society guests distort and meld together, absorbing their victim. It is revealed that Bill was adopted and he is to be their next victim. He gets into a fight with Ted and ends up turning him inside out. And then he manages to escape with Milo and Clarissa. I love this film. It is very silly and it's maybe a bit clunky, but I don't know. I just really love it. And it's very much, the subtext is the text. It is very much about the elites of society feeding on people below them. And this whole idea that the rich are basically this different species and that they are fundamentally different. And a lot of the characters keep saying that, yeah, you have to be born into this. You're either born into high society or you are not. And if you're born into high society, you are fundamentally different, and that the people below you are just things that you can use, things that you consume. This film was directed by Brian Yuzna, who came up before in episode 2 when we looked at Reanimator. He was the producer on that, and he wanted to move from producing to directing. So this is his first directorial effort.
We spoke last time about Clockwork Orange being kind of a rite of passage film where it's like, oh, have you seen this? For me, Society was a bit like that as well, just because it's so mad and it's so like, and the ending is so bananas that it kind of becomes this, you know, oh, if you're into horror, are you? Well, have you ever seen Society? And I always kind of heard about it for a long time before I actually saw it. So it is kind of like one of those oddities that would get passed around, or everyone would say, oh, you have to watch it.
As soon as one person sees it, you have to tell everyone, like, what the heck? You have to see what I just saw.
Yeah. But it's like, and it's interesting because it's a film that relies on this just completely bonkers final act, that the film is so heightened and weird from the beginning that it creates this tone of this comedic tone, I suppose, or this high, over-the-top tone that makes it so the ending makes sense for the world of the film, I suppose you could say. And like having the opening credits where you kind of see all the weird, like, gloopy, pulsating flesh, and you're just like, but before the first time you watch it, you just say, what is going on here? And then the opening shots are all like Dutch angles, and the music is all really like loud and screechy, and it is such a weird film. But I think when you hear about it, you're expecting something very different than what you get, I think. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's just I think you think, oh, it's going to be this really horrific film, but it's actually just really goofy and silly, but with a really twisted sense of humor.
Because it does have this feeling up until the crazy shunting sequence, that it has this feel and look to it that's a bit, I always think of like Beverly Hills 90210 because it's set in Beverly Hills, almost this televisual style to it, but also like a goofy teen movie because, well, one of the things is that you've got Billy Warlock, who had been in a lot of soap operas at that time and ends up being on Baywatch. All the teenagers in the film are all obviously in their 20s, which is a very Beverly Hills 90210 thing. So it has this, like you said, this goofiness to it, and it's all very bright. And then it just goes completely mad. But the opening of the film is this what turns out to be a nightmare of Bill, where he's coming into his home and it just feels like he senses a threat. So he's going around his house and he's walking around, and at one point he goes into the kitchen and gets out a knife. And so it is this whole thing of his home doesn't feel like a safe space. He feels like things aren't right. And then it turns out that he's actually telling this dream to his therapist. And as he's talking to his therapist, he bites into an apple and sees worms, which then that turns out that they're not actually there. And so it feels almost, it reminds me a bit of Blue Velvet, the fact that you have at the beginning of that all this beautiful surface, and then it goes underneath and you see all these insects. And Bill even says to his therapist, I feel like something is going to happen, and if I scratch the surface, there will be something underneath. So a lot of the film, until the crazy ending, is very much just about Bill's paranoia. He knows that something isn't right. And the thing is that it's the way everyone acts in the film is like, yeah, something's weird here. Something isn't right. Something is off. You see also Bill with his family. You have his parents, and the way they talk does seem a bit odd. And also he has his sister Jenny, and it's obviously that there's some strange incestuous feeling that he has for Jenny as well. Also, he looks very different. Like, they're all blonde, Aryan looking, and he's quite short and with dark hair. So he definitely does stand out as different in his family. There's even
also when he walks in, every time he walks into a room, they're massaging each other and just doing weird. Like, you're just like, what? You're father and daughter, and you're like all touching each other and being really inappropriate. Yeah.
So it is this. I mean, they're not even like undertones.
No.
It is very overt, this weird incestuous aspect to the family. And of course, later on you realize that, yes, that is part of what they do, the part of the shunten, or the basically these orgies where it is all the taboos. I mentioned cannibalism being, one of the major taboo in society, and certainly that's part of the shunt as well. They're literally feeding on these lower class people, but yet incest as well, I think, is probably the other taboo. So it is all the taboos, and it's the whole thing of, I guess, this high society. They don't see that they have to abide by those taboos. All those rules and things are for the other people, the common people. They don't have to go along with that. But you have quite early on also Blanchard, so Jenny's ex-boyfriend, although he doesn't look like, I'm like, really, he got to go out with her. But anyway, he shows up and he confirms Bill's fears, and then it kind of cuts to Billy at school, and he's going for class president. And it's interesting because he's on the basketball team and his girlfriend Shauna is a cheerleader. So it does at first seem like he does have this typical, like, great high school existence. And I think the opponent, Martin Petrie, he looks very nerdy. And I think he even says at this debate, oh, you're all just going to vote for him because he's popular. And it also makes me think that does seem like he is very popular, but I'm wondering if that's all part of the conspiracy of everyone's just going along. I don't know. It's an interesting kind of question, I think, that it's set up that it's almost set up like he's this jock and he's going for school president. It's even unclear as to why he's going for school president. And the guy he's against looks like this nerdy guy. And later on it seems like he's going to help him expose the conspiracy, but then he ends up being a part of it. I think he's running for class president to impress his parents and to show them that he's got all this potential. Because I think he's having a panic attack over being not knowing who he having doubts about who he really is, and he wants to impress his parents, but they just seem completely unimpressed with anything he does. But having him be kind of popular in school shows that he does have some potential, I think, and he is. As a person, he can achieve some things, but I think he wants more than that. He wants more out of life than just being the high school football champion. And I think he's looking towards what he wants to be outside of school. Because he says at some point when they're talking about the party, and he says someday it's going to be my party. Like, he wants to be. He obviously, because he feels like he doesn't belong in this society, and he's constantly looking for ways to become part of it. But he never can because he's adopted and he's not part of the elite, that the incestuous shunting gloop pile that is society. And I think that's the other reason with Blanchard is that he is part of sort of the elite society, but
he's Jewish. So that means he can never be part of it because there's the group of the society of the film are the wasps, the waspy, and I think they even say going back to the time of Caesar or something. But like they're obviously like because there's that tradition of all the country clubs and stuff in America that like they don't let Jewish people become members because that's that they're all very kind of low-key racially charged, low-key racist about all that sort of stuff. So it's very much this particular group of people that look down. They say, I've got some stuff written down like that there are people who make the rules and people who follow them. It is a matter of who you were born to. And just things like that. So they don't think rules that apply to them other than the rules they use to exclude people from their circle.
Because they keep going on about this idea of breeding, and you have to be born into it, and so it's this whole thing of it's set in Beverly Hills, and so you would have like the nouveau riche probably there, and they're never going to be probably accepted into this society. And it's interesting that even though Bill is seen as very popular, there still is the fact that he. Like Shauna, when they're at the beach, Shauna is complaining that they haven't been invited to this party at Ted Ferguson's place.
Tycoon Ted.
Yes, so there's still this exclusion that is happening. And it's interesting that when he goes over to Ted on the beach, and then you see Martin Petrie, the guy who's going up against him for school president, he's hanging out with them. It almost seems like there are maybe these different hierarchies, or how high schools always are. There are these different groups. I mean, the fact that he is this athlete, again, maybe is setting him apart. And the fact that he has a basketball game, which is... Obviously, it's designed that this basketball game is happening the same time as Jenny's coming out party because they don't want him. He's not invited. Yeah. He can't be involved because he's not. Well, it turns out he's not their actual son. He hasn't been born into society. And then later on, you hear the recording of the coming out party, which is it's a very interesting scene, very funny scene where you just hear them. It's Jenny with her parents, and it's all very matter of fact, like first dining, then copulation, and it starts with someone your own age, which we find out is Ted, and then her parents will be her next partners, and and you start to hear some of the shunting in this recording, and there's those lines where there's one girl saying it's so fun to see how far you can stretch. The more hotter and wetter you get, the more you can do. So it's unclear exactly what's happening, but you're starting to get some indication of what actually happens at these parties. Then when he goes to his therapist because he's like, oh, I finally have confirmation of what I've been feeling this whole entire time. But then when he plays it to his therapist, the dialogue has been slightly changed and it all seems quite innocent. And so it's all very much the first kind of 2/3 of the film is all just about this paranoia and this conspiracy that seems to be underneath the surface.
Yeah, I think the script goes to the great pains to like pull the rug out from underneath Bill at every conceivable turn, and it's almost frustrating because how frustrating is that they just keep throwing up all these sort of hurdles for him to navigate, and then he gets denied, and then they change the recording, then there's even like the dolls that he finds in the car, and you're like, what does all this mean? It almost seems like somebody knows the truth. But it turns out it was just Milo was upset at him because weird. He's like, you were ignoring me and I felt mad at you, so I was leaving these, like I left you a Barbie doll with a screw in its head. Then I left you a sex doll, blow-up sex doll. And it's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like they couldn't think of what, they just wanted to kind of pile on the paranoia and all this weird stuff. And then there's like Clarissa's mum, who's like that weird woman who eats the hair. But then she becomes like integral to the film because without her, like she bops all these people on the head at the end, like, and it's like, but without her, like the heroes can't kind of win the day really. But she's just kind of this sight gag because Clarissa's this really attractive woman, very sexy, and Bill's like into her, and it seems like she might be one of these like society people, but then her mum is just this like mute woman wandering around, looks like something out of a John Waters movie, and just wanting to eat people's hair, and it's just this running gag which you kind of gets annoying after a while, I must admit. But then they kind of turn the tables at the end, and she shows up at the party and like helps the heroes.
Yeah, Milo brings her along with him. But it's interesting. So you got Clarissa, who you're introduced to her near the beginning during that first school debate, and she's there in the front row, and she like opens her legs. It's a bit Basic Instinct kind of thing, kind of almost flashing him, although she has underwear on. And then, you know, when he finally, you know, so after he's got this recording and the recording's been switched, and he's starting to try and figure out, you know, what exactly is going on. Blanchett ends up being killed when he was on his way to meet him. But then he suddenly gets this invite to Ted's party, and it's almost like, maybe I think the invite to the party was like, stop looking into this. You're trying to kind of placate him in some way. And then when he's at the party, he meets Clarissa. He sees Clarissa there, and they end up going home and having sex. And it's interesting with the Clarissa that there also is that the line that she has after they have sex, where she's asking, "How do you take your tea?" And she goes, "Cream, sugar, or do you want me to pee in it?" And so there's just these weird little lines, and there's an interview with Brian Yuzna on the Blu-ray. Brian Yuzna says that he always is just interested in leaning into the weirdness, and he kind of, I think he even says like, it doesn't matter if it doesn't make sense, like that's not, I don't care. But if it's just weird or interesting, then I'm going to put it in there. So you do have those strange little lines, and you have Clarissa's mother, who does not look like Clarissa at all. No. And it is this whole thing of, because I think at one point I think Milo even says to Bill, "Oh, she's trouble, and don't you know about her mum?" And so I don't know if it seems like Clarissa is part of this society, but then they're also slightly outside as well because of her mother. Like I don't know. Yeah, there's clearly something wrong with her mother. And the whole thing of she comes in after they've been together and presents Bill with this weird hairball that she's coughed up. I think Yuzna has said it's about the idea, not the logic. That Clarissa, she kind of is seen as this bad girl, and she obviously was clearly born into society, because when he comes out and sees her and she's all twisted, it seems like the top half of her is facing him, but then her bottom half with her, I guess it's almost like boobs and buttocks both seen. It's like everything you want to see just right there. So and it's this the same when he goes into and sees Jenny in the shower. Sees that something's weird, and so he opens the door. Again, it's all this inappropriate things with the family. Yeah, I mean,
because Yuzna just piles on the paranoia where you just think Bill just thinks he's going nuts, which is why things like, "Do you want me to pee in it?" is fun, because you're with him the whole way, just going, "Did she actually say that? Did that actually happen?" And he thinks he's going nuts, and then they take him to the hospital and they say that he's dead. But then he escapes, but his car's wait, and so it's all arranged. Everything that's been going on in the movie, more or less, is the major plot of it has been arranged by his family, because the whole thing is that they're mind fucking him because they're basically playing with their food, right? And that they want him to be so paranoid and driven to go back to the house to see what's going on that they can then trap him and absorb him and blah blah blah. Because him and Milo basically team up, and there's a great line where Bill just says, "I'm not paranoid, all my fears are real." I just love that line.
Yeah.
And then Milo says, "What's your plan?" And he goes, "Plan? You kidding?" And then they go off, and he's like, I've got no plan. We're just doing this. And then then they get to the but then there's the whole thing that Blanchard they think he thinks he's been in a car accident and died, but then it turns out that he's actually alive, and he shows up at the party, and that's when they do the shunt, and you just see, and the society is led by this judge who has that cigar which just seems to survive the whole process of melting down, and he says, yeah, was it love the smell of the hunt and the taste of the shunt? So there's these great lines in this movie.
Yeah.
And then they tear Blanchett apart and absorb him, and they, stick their hands in him and they go in one end and pop out the other, and it's all gooey and stretchy and gross. We can just talk about that whole scene and the special effects by Screaming Mad George.
Yes, the surrealistic
makeup effects, which is what the credits say officially.
Yeah.
Which is just so out there and strange and bizarre. And he, of course, was a big collaborator with Yuzna, and they worked together on a lot of films. So much goop. What was they said it was like?
I can't remember what it was.
It's something that they use in baking or something, and it's like this weird. It all looks like lube, but it's like that. There's just so much goop, and it's all these stretchy skin and bones in weird positions. And if you're listening to this, you've hopefully seen it, but if you haven't. Just you look up the pictures, I suppose.
Words cannot express.
Words are really hard to describe, like the way these things look. There's even a whole bit where like the judge like absorbs Blanchett, and Blanchett's got like a beauty mark on his head, and then now the judge has it. The psychiatrist, like his whole head turns into a giant hand. It's just bonkers stuff. And like you said, he fights Bill fights, is it Tommy? Ted, and turns him inside out.
Yeah.
Literally. It's just wild stuff. It kind of reminds me of, what happened a few years later is like the ending of Peter Jackson's Brain Dead. Just kind of this, the whole film leading up to this one big moment in this house where everything just, all bets are off, and it's just utter carnage and chaos.
But it's interesting that initially when Yuzna got the script, it was supposed to be a blood cult. And so he liked a lot of the idea, but he was like, oh, well, that's kind of been done a million times of it just being this blood sacrifice. And so he wanted to lean more into the weirdness of it. And then with Screaming Mad George, who had worked previously as a visual artist, and Screaming Mad George, the kind of art that he would make was surrealist art. And he has talked a lot about how he's really inspired, in particular, by Salvador Dali. On the Blu-ray, there's an interview, and he mentions a couple of Dali paintings, one called Autumnal Cannibalism, so cannibalism, and another one called Soft Construction with Boiled Beans, (premonition of a Civil War). And if you look up those paintings, there definitely are. It's all these weird body parts and stretched body parts that is definitely very much like the shunt. And then Screaming Mad George also said that he was inspired by the transformation scenes in American Werewolf in London and The Howling, and also Altered States. So call back to our second episode. And Brian Yuzna has talked about this idea of simulacra, and this whole idea of like seeing something else in something. So it is a head, but also looks like a hand.
So the simple version of that would be like you see a cloud shaped like an elephant or something.
Yeah,
like you go, oh, that's an elephant.
Yeah.
But it's a cloud.
Yeah, and this just becomes it's all very grotesque. And the fact that there is no blood, that the fluids are all clear, so it's very clearly sexual fluids. Like this is an orgy. This isn't like a ritual sacrifice. This is a sexual act. Where it's this group body, these people in this society become this one entity. So it is this whole idea of the rich being a different species. And I think the therapist says something about that they are a different species, or that Bill is a different species, race, class to them, and that you have to be born into society. And I think if Bill calls them like alien scum, and he goes, we're not from outer space, we've always been here, and the fact that it's a matter of good breeding. So very much is similar to They Live, but in that the rich are aliens. But the whole thing of that this is something from this planet. There is even that mention that they come from what is the time of, or they have lineage back to Julius Caesar, and I think they also say Genghis Khan.
That's right, yeah.
When Ted and Bill fight with each other, Ted is introduced as having this lineage from Julius Caesar and Genghis Khan, the master of the hunt, the champion of the shunt, and then Bill is referred to as the bastard. So it's this whole thing. It's completely unclear as to where Bill is from, who his actual family is, how they found him. In these high societies, I think also of royalty, that they do have a lot of basically inbreeding, and the whole thing of you bring someone from the outside just to kind of, I don't know, change things up because they can't just keep
deepen the gene pool a little bit more.
Yeah. And it is interesting that this film, that it is an American film dealing with class and this idea of elite society and old money, which I think more in terms of British culture and British society. I mean, living here, the class system is very apparent all the time. It feels it's very clear that you have this deeply ingrained class system that goes back for so many years, and you have this aristocracy and royalty, and that they do basically just live off everyone. They get paid for by us, by working people. And it's just interesting that in a lot of American society, it often is more about, I guess, racial divisions rather than class divisions. And I think also of Get Out is kind of similar thing, but looking at the kind of race divisions. And I've always felt that that class seems more of it's more prevalent, I think, in British society and British films. So it's an interesting film in that it is very much looking at this class division in particular.
Well, I think that's also goes to why it was more popular here than it was in the States. They were going on those extras, and I've read a little bit about how in the UK and Europe they were much more receptive to the film than they were in America. And that I think even in the interview, Billy Warlock saying they had the premiere in America and it was all very small and unassuming, and then they went to the London premiere and it was a red carpet, paparazzi everywhere. He couldn't believe it. And also, but thinking about the way it looks at class, it is made in 1989, so this is the tail end of Reagan. Reagan's time is coming to a close. George H.W. Bush, George Bush Sr. is about to take over. So I think there's a big commentary on the Reagan 80s here, especially with that whole kind of 80s country club set, and the Wasps taking over everything. And that's probably why in America it didn't go down so well, is because people weren't really wanting to look at themselves like that.
And it's funny because the thing is that a lot of this elite in the film, they're ridiculous. I mean, and it does make me think that you have the presidents, George W. Bush. When he was president, there was always jokes about how he was a total C student, but yet he somehow ends up becoming the president. And now you've got Trump, who talks all the time about how he has such a good brain, which is the stupidest thing you could ever say. So it is this whole thing of this elite in the film is that they see themselves as superior, but they're seen as very ridiculous. And again, I have to go back to Sard and Salo. I mean, Salo is that's just it is a really grim, disturbing, gross film. But having watched it several times, because I've written about it quite a lot and it was part of my PhD, one thing that happens once you get over just how sickening Salo is, the more you actually watch it, if you can stomach watching it multiple times, it does start to become weirdly funny. Yeah. Because in that you have these four men who have created their own kind of society that have these ridiculous rules, and it's the whole thing of that the Marquis de Sade was himself an aristocrat, and it is this whole thing of that he saw himself as not needing to follow the same rules that govern the rest of the people, but the societies or the kind of alternate societies that he creates are ridiculous, that there is this weird satirical aspect, because it does, like if you read the 120 Days of Sodom, because it was unfinished, it just descends into this list of atrocities, but yet the atrocities have become so extreme that some of them do become quite ridiculous. It's almost silly, for want of a better word. But yet it's this whole thing of that the society or this whole kind of system of sadism that Gilles Deleuze talked about, how masochism and sadism were kind of two separate systems, and he said, and Deleuze said that the sadist is in need of institutions, that the thing that almost becomes quite ridiculous in Sartre's works with his sadists, his libertines, is that they have these really strict hierarchies and organizations, but it is just so extreme that it and so perverse. And what's also prevalent in a lot of Sartre's works that I see in this film is the kind of fixation on anal sexuality. There's the thing with, during the shunt, when Blanchard is presented, and they all start melding around him, the judge, basically, it seems like it is almost like fisting him very aggressively, to the point that his hand kind of comes out of his mouth. Even at one point when Bill is in hospital, there's a tracking around the room, and because there's different beds, and there's a sign, and at one point it's like, I think a sign near another bed, and it mentions something about they're about to have a high enema or something. So there's all this, again, this taboo around kind of anal sexuality and anal penetration that seems to be prevalent in the film, and in Sartre's work that comes up again and again. Yeah, it's just I just whenever I watch Society, it just feels very Sartrean in what it's saying and how it's putting across, and all this kind of the taboo aspects that it incorporates into it, and also that it just descends into this just crazy orgy, and the fact that the film, at the end, Bill and Milo and Clarissa, and I think Clarissa's mother, end up kind of running away, but it kind of just ends on this gag of, because Ted was about to go to Washington, it ends with just the judge going, "Oh well, we're going to need someone else for that internship now." So it's another ambiguous open ending, like with Soylent Green, of like, yeah, they've got away, but this is the way it is. It's going to continue.
Yeah, they're still going to be in power, and the society is still going to exploit people, but they just get away with their lives. Like they don't get to claim these guys as victims this time. So it's very much like, yeah, nothing. They don't really change anything. They just survive.
Is there anything else we want to say about this film? I mean, one of the things...
I think you've said plenty.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was also gonna say, the whole idea of like secret societies. I mean, we were talking about the link to British culture, and I was just kept thinking about David Icke and the Lizard People.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Well, but then America is very, the secret societies, or is very much part of America's historical makeup as well. I mean, with the Freemasons, basically, George Washington was a Freemason, and there was the John Birch Society, who were like the right wing guy, and then you'd have the fraternities at universities and things, and there was like this, Skull and Bones Society, or whatever they're called, that they say always members of that always went into the CIA and things like that, and Bohemian Grove and all these things, that it's just like that. All of that stuff goes hand in hand when you look at the upper crust of American society.
Yeah, so I think even Yuzna has said that, it does go to this crazy, fantastical place, but that there is almost some reality to what the film is presenting. And
would the film what didn't do well in America at the time, but it feels more in fitting with a lot of the movies, horror movies that are coming out now. That the ones that I like to call elite exploitation. I don't know if anyone else has got a name for it, but things like Ready or Not feature the rich as the villains, and the whole point is that that they're up to no good.
Yeah, there's a whole, I think I've heard it referred to as 1% horror and eat the rich horror. There's definitely the whole, and the secret societies and things. That's definitely something that is seen in a lot of films, I think, over the past 10 years. And I remember the night of the beginning of the first Trump presidency, I did watch Society because it just felt very fitting. So I think definitely you're right. It's a film that I think has really grown over the years, and it's definitely, you can see, I think its influence now, and a lot of what it was doing is what a lot of filmmakers are doing today. And on that note, should we move on to our honourable mentions? Mm-hmm. So I guess we need to start off with what's our X-Files episode?
I was thinking of a few because, the show is rife with Mulder and Scully showing up at a small town where the town itself has become villainous or evil. If we're talking cannibalism, there is one from, is it season 2 or 3? Our Town, which is about basically the town patriarch went back in World War II, crashes his plane in somewhere in New Guinea and ends up with a bunch of cannibalistic tribespeople and brings that practice back to America. But the one which I think is the most fitting in terms of a society as monstrous, is the season 6 episode Arcadia, which finds Mulder and Scully undercover as a newlywed couple infiltrating a planned community.
Oh, I love this episode.
Where everything on the outside is spick and span because Mr. Gogolak, which is such a great name, who is sort of the superintendent of the community, runs a very tight ship by having a big rule book, the CCNRs, that everybody has to follow. So you can't have a pet that's that's over a certain size. You've got to have the right color on your mailbox, and if you don't play by these rules, he sicks a monster onto you to destroy you. And it's a tulpa, a thought form that he conjures out of the landfill on which the community is built on. And again, it's about a white guy who goes to the Far East and comes back with some strange powers or techniques that he's learned while over there, which, X-Files goes to that well a few too many times, and it's, a bit problematic to say the least, a bit of a cultural appropriation. But the Gogolak runs a Pier 9 imports business, so it almost, if they did a bit more with it, you could see that it would be more like he's co-opting the cult. He is actually co-opting the culture by bringing it back and using it for his own nefarious purposes. So and it's all about this guy trying to control society through fear. And if you don't toe the line, then the monster will come and get you. And it's basically designed just for a bit of comedy, to have Mulder and Scully pretend to be married for the most part of the episode. But I think that's the most fitting one that I could think of for this one.
And I've mentioned it a bit earlier when we were talking about society, but I think I do have to mention Get Out. I think it is one of the most important horror films made, but I think what Jordan Peele is doing in the film is it's similar in a sense to Society, but it is kind of taking the whole idea of enslavement and consumption of black bodies, and kind of turns it into this. There is this secret society that is taking over the. That people, as they get older, the rich white people are able to kind of put themselves into a young black body. It's definitely, I think, also set a trend for these, what Jordan Peele calls social thrillers, that they are looking at the inequalities of society. And I think because of the success of Get Out, that you get a lot of films that are certainly looking at racial inequalities in America, such as the remake of Candyman, but also all the rise of this kind of elite exploitation, or whatever you want to call it. I think also about the Purge series as well. I think the Purge certainly is this whole idea of this idea of the Purge, that society needs this one night where all the rules and all the laws are no longer existing, but how that ends up really being used by those of the upper classes for their own means, and it does end up becoming, the lack of the laws is actually, it's still a form of control. But yeah, so definitely I think Get Out is such an important film. I think it's just so, like, the more I watch that film, like the more I get out of it each time. And it was this perspective, because the thing is, like, in society, I think there only are white people in that film.
Yeah.
And it is very much about this class divisions, and it's not looking at ideas around race at all.
Oh, I was thinking with Soylent Green, like with Charlton Heston, we did kind of briefly touch on the fact that he made a lot of dystopian sci-fi. I won't. There's a Mega Man and there's the Planet of the Apes, but in terms of the society aspect, I did think of two. There was sort of 70s sci-fi, and that's A Boy and His Dog, starring a young Don Johnson, but which I did think about for this. But the one I really want to talk about is Logan's Run, which you mentioned a little bit at the start, because that's very, that is set inside this very contained society that lives basically underground or inside a giant dome, where nobody basically lives beyond the age of 30. Yeah, everyone has a little, like a jewel in their hand, which changes color when they're due to go on the carousel, which is where you jump on this into this machine, and you're supposed to transcend, and you're never seen again. But they don't call it death; they just it's considered an honor to do this. But there are people who don't agree with having to do that, so they try to run, they try to escape. So society creates a police force called the Sandmen, which features Logan, played by Michael York, who has to go after these runners. But of course, like with Heston in Soylent Green, his investigations into the runners makes him doubt the very society that he is trying to enforce the law in. So the film then progresses with him himself becoming a runner and escaping this society and finding himself in the outside world, and realizing that there is a whole world out there and a whole life to be lived, and that you can live beyond the age of 30. And it's I think it's shot, like all the interior bits are all shot inside a mall. So it has this very kind of contained feeling to it. And it's, I really enjoy Logan's Run. I think it's a lot of fun. And it has a great Peter Ustinov cameo at the end.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up, I mean, when you talk about like showing class divisions on screen, I think you have to talk about Bong Joon-ho.
Yes.
Got his film Parasite, which isn't a horror or a science fiction film, but just recently, or out in cinemas at the moment, is his film Mickey 17. And in that you have, again, it's very much the class divisions, and you have this dystopian future where you have Mickey, played by Robert Pattinson, who ends up signing up for this, I guess, scheme. It's just I think it is to get away from a situation, but the whole thing is that you're a worker, but the whole thing is that if you die, you just get replicated. And so it's this whole thing, you're continually kind of able to work because it doesn't matter, health and safety, because if you die or something happens to you, then you can just print out a new version of it. And you have, it's very much, a dystopian society where they're trying to kind of build a new society. So you have the baddie, which is played by Mark Ruffalo, playing this. He almost seems like this melding of, he's very Trumpian because he is, in charge, but he's also really, really stupid. But also a bit of Elon Musk as well, this whole idea of wanting to go out and colonize. And also they talk about how they almost want to create this new particular like race of people. They want to repopulate and breed. It's not as successful as Bong Joon-ho's other films, but I think it's definitely in keeping with what you see often in his work. Obviously Snowpiercer as well.
That's on my list.
That's The Train is a society, and the whole thing of the people who are higher up are at the front of the train, and as you go further down the train, it's the lower classes. So definitely wanted to give a shout out to Bong Joon-ho. I guess if I had to really make a recommendation, it would definitely be Snowpiercer, which also has become a really good television series as well. All right, so I think we'll leave it there. So this is our first season kind of done.
Wow.
Yeah.
We started from the bottom, now we're here.
Yep.
Slightly higher up from the bottom.
I am. Yep. Progressing, advancing.
6 episodes from the bottom.
Yes. I mean, it would be good to hear from people if they have any thoughts, if they what they want us to do in future episodes or future seasons. You can contact us at scifrightspod@gmail.com.
No, scifrightspodcast@gmail.com.
Oh, okay, sorry. scifrightspodcast@gmail.com. And also we're on social media. It'd be good if people could start leaving reviews of us as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've seen some encouraging comments from people on Spotify, so you can comment on where you get your podcasts. I'm sure there's comments and likes and things you can do there. It'd be much appreciated.
All right, so the next time you'll see us, should we say what we're thinking of for our next?
We could.
Yeah. We're thinking of going into the area of artificial intelligence.
Yes, like talking about it, not employing it.
No. Yes, we are an AI-free podcast. But yeah, so please tune in, and thank you all for listening.
Bye-bye.